theme song.
My leather black jeans on, my by any means on, caught and I'm getting my scream on.
Can anyone here tell me how many ads the average human sees in a 24-hour period? Who thinks it's 100 a day? Raise your hands. Who thinks it's more than 1,000 a day? The number, in fact, is 3,500 ad messages a day. When you consider that most people sleep about 8 hours, maybe no one in this room, but most people sleep about 8 hours, that's more than an ad a minute every day of your life. So think about that. If you're a brand and you're trying to get through a message to your audience in a world where you're inundated with information, because that's not counting your emails, your conversations, or anything else. How do you do that? Well, a lot of brands are turning to techniques that drive real engagement with their audience. And how do they do that? They do that through writing stories and creating videos. Because if you can write a story or create a video that's interesting to your audience, they will watch it and they will be interested in it. And so obviously at PulsePoint, we are really interested in this trend. And so we did a research study with Digiday to look more into what's going on around the trend of content marketing and native advertising. And so earlier today, you got a nice white paper that we produced that's on your chairs. Read it later, take it home, share it with a loved one. But what I'll do is go through what we think is really important for you to take away right now. 3 things. Number 1, brands are looking to drive better engagement with their audiences in a busy world. And one of the ways they're doing that is through writing stories and producing video, also known as content marketing. Number 2, they're turning to native advertising to deliver this message and find their audience. Native advertising will be done programmatically. It's being done now, and that will just accelerate, a new trend. And number 3, obviously because they're trying to drive engagement, the metrics that matter are changing. So let's look at this in a little more detail, what our research found. Close to 70% of marketers say that within the next 2 years, they will be utilizing content marketing to talk to their audience. 66% of them say that they'll leverage native to support brand engagement. Why have we put these 2 things together? Well, when you think about it, if you're creating a story or video and you need to find your audience, what better way than putting it in a non-intrusive ad? An ad that focuses on the content inside of that ad rather than pushing an intrusive message your way. And so basically what you're going to start seeing is more and more use of this type of medium because more and more stories and content are being created. And let's look at the dollars. So this is looking at rate of growth. By 2017, brands say that the rate of growth of what they're going to invest in content marketing will go up 59%. Native is next, and both of those outpace digital video, which we all know is growing very aggressively. Why is this happening? Again, they need to find a way to communicate with their audience. They know that if they write stories and videos and they distribute them out in ad formats that are engaging rather than offensive, they will make real connections with their audience. So here's the brand. They're creating a bunch of stories. They're creating a bunch of videos, and they're distributing them out. In fact, that's not that new, because content marketing has been around since the 1800s, right? Brands have written stories, they've sponsored movies, they've done all sorts of things. But what's really exciting about it is that technology is driving their ability to scale it and turn it into a much more relevant part of their marketing campaigns. Now they can write a story, create a video, and distribute it out to millions of people. And if they do that programmatically, they can better target that audience, they can optimize for performance, and they can get a wealth of data, a lot of data that they would never have had before, because what they're looking for is someone to see an excerpt of that story, come to where that story sits, and read it. And once that happens, there's a lot of data that can be gathered. And so, you know, we actually asked brands, here was the question we asked. How will automation and technology help you with your content marketing strategies? And they were able to pick a few. You see that 60% say it will help drive more precise targeting. 45% said distribute content at scale. And 58% said, you know, achieve better measurement and optimization. And so brands are looking at this and saying, wow, we've been spending thousands of dollars creating these incredible videos about hiking on mountains, and no one's seeing it. But now we can utilize technology to get everyone to see it. And not just everyone, the people that specifically matter. That's the revolution that is occurring and why you're hearing so much about content marketing and native. 83% of respondents believe content marketing will go programmatic by 2017. And again, they're not talking about using a machine to write the story or create the video, because that needs to be truly engaging. What they're talking about is just taking that video and story and distributing it out to the rest of the world, and then measuring performance. So you're in a world where brands are driving more engagement. What metrics matter? We've been looking at this very closely, and we've also polled people, and this should make sense to you. It's not necessarily only about the click. It's about, did someone read my story? Did they view my video? I'm sure a lot of your clients are actually looking at this, and a lot of you from the brand are also starting to be concerned about things like time on page. Did they view the video? Was it shared out on social media? How far down the page did someone scroll? These are really important things that prove engagement, because that's what matters. When someone writes a story or creates a video and sticks it in a native ad, they don't want that ad seen on CNN.com. They want someone to click on it and come read that story. And so, this shouldn't surprise you. Which of the following metrics do you use to measure the success of campaigns? 62% said time on page, a publisher metric, because they are becoming publishers. 78% social engagements. Of course, CTR and impressions still matter, because there is actually the ad delivery. But you will see these numbers and additional metrics coming more and more online as this becomes a bigger part of brands' budgets. So that's it. It was a quick presentation because I wanted to leave time for questions. Anyone have any?
Thank you. So content marketing requires, from the consumer standpoint, a greater investment of time to be exposed to that content. So if more and more brands are doing it, and more brands will be doing it more often, won't there be a saturation point whereby which there's too much noise out there from a content marketing standpoint? And how will you be able to recognize that and solve for that?
Well, I think the solution is actually in the programmatic solution, because the key is, if I'm able to deliver the right message to you that is meaningful, then you'll read it. If I send you a message that's not meaningful, it will be noise. And so part of the solution here, you see that brands say that they think it'll help with targeting, is if I'm writing a story, what are you interested in? What do you do besides work?
Music.
Okay, what kind of music? Rock and roll?
Sure.
Okay, so if I'm a band that, you know, wants to communicate to you, and I write a story about a band that you like, and I deliver it to you in a nice format where you're on Rolling Stone, you will read it. If I send you the wrong type of music, you won't. And that's the simple truth of this. It's about the targeting. And so as we're talking a lot today about improving targeting and technologies, in fact, this is the same methodology. The right story or video to the right person at the right time. It's quite simple. It actually helps clear the noise up. The other thing is, you don't actually have to engage with it if you don't want to. It's not being pushed in your face. It's a suggestion to read. And so the ultimate test is you're clicking on it to go to it and read it. Any other questions?
Hi there, thank you, very informative. From a buyer standpoint, what's sort of the philosophical difference of how they should be buying native programmatically versus how they buy display or video or mobile?
Well, I think from a buyer standpoint, you're buying native because you want that content read or viewed. It's about the engagement. So it's really not about the amount of impressions that you're buying. It's not about how many people saw that native ad. It's about what they did when they saw that native ad, because our clients are paying us collectively for that content to be viewed or read. And so the methodology should be about, okay, I'm glad that you delivered to the right people, but how many of those people actually clicked on that native ad and viewed the content that was inside of it or the excerpt of it and where you're driving it? Make sense?
When you're talking about engagement metrics, sort of how are you tying this into the overall story of ROI from the start? And sort of CTR is just such a directly kind of understandable way in certain ways, whereas engagement can be a little bit more gray. So I'm just curious how you sort of present that.
Yeah, well, so I do think that it's not as black and white yet, and these methodologies are being developed. But you are able to tell if someone read a piece of content and then, for instance, online actually purchased one of your products. How many of you are excited or not excited about the iWatch? Did you first hear about it in an ad or in a story? This is the same concept. So in fact, if I do eventually go buy an iWatch, which I haven't done yet, it's not because of those cool billboards I saw. It's because I read an article about it in New York Times and said, man, this is cool. So it's the same methodology. The engagements that matter is, did someone read this? Once they read it, did they eventually come to my page and buy? Technologies allow you to track that fairly simply now. It's more of an investment in looking at this stuff, but the brands are demanding it because they want engagement with these users. They don't just want a click. Any other questions?
Hi. One of the challenges that we're finding when we talk to clients about the content marketing out in the publisher landscape is a lot of the content that's being distributed through things like Outbrain and Taboola is really clickbait. It's the top celebrity gaffes on the runway or the whatever, and it's leading to really shitty content. You have to click multiple times to see the images, and it's really doing a disservice to the whole content marketing industry. What's your view on that?
Quality matters, quality of partners. Tell your clients to use us or Triple Lift. I mean, but seriously, I think that actually if you look at a company like Outbrain, they really have pretty high quality controls in. There are some players out there that are allowing content that is literally clickbait to be distributed, but there are a lot of people out there that are very concerned about the quality of the content in there. If some of you know anything about the ecosystem, there is an approval process for most of the higher quality players out there. The creative has to be approved. And our experience is that most of the higher quality players are very focused on this, A, because they don't want to upset their publishers, and B, to your point, they don't want the ecosystem to be denigrated with crappy content. And the consumer, also to your point, clearly understands the difference. What will ultimately help here is that brands invest in really high quality content and choose their distribution partners very carefully to distribute that content out. So for the players that are out there that have lower standards, ultimately that's going to hurt them in the long run, I believe. Any other questions? It's hard to see.
That we have right now.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and in fact, now we're going to have a quick coffee break, so please be back here by, let's see, 15 minutes, 10:50.